Look, I'm going to be completely honest about this. I thought what Wizards owner Sheila Johnson said about Caitlin Clark came off as...
Did a WNBA owner recently receive in the most embarrassing double norm for the season when Washington's Sheila Johnson, the owner of Mystics, criticized on the cover of Time magazine? Caitlin Clark said the league as a whole deserved acknowledgement of more than one player, yet her actions convey a whole different message. Story and basketball enthusiasts worldwide are, if you have been following her, you're calling her out. As you are aware, the WNBA this season league has seen historically high-growth TV ratings are skyrocketing. Sales of tickets are surpassing previous records, and participation in social media is done through the roof in the middle of this blast of Caitlin, a rookie sensation, is of interest. Clark, whose departure from college from superstar to professional athlete, won over millions of new admirers. But not everyone was pleased with Clark's rapid ascent after Time magazine identified Sheila Clark, their Athlete of the Year Johnson. The Washington Mystics owner CNN featured a franchise with some selective language on the acknowledgement.
Sheila Johnson is the black billionaire owner of the NHL's Washington Capitals, the NBA's Washington Wizards, and the WNBA's Washington Mystics. Johnson said she did not agree with Time magazine making Caitlin Clark the first ever WNBA player to be Athlete of the Year, and with putting Caitlin Clark on the cover.
Where Caitlin Clark received the title of Athlete of the Y, were they unable to place the WNBA as a whole on that cover, saying that the reason the WNBA is the League of the Year is among all of our talent, Johnson stated in the interview.
The entire WNBA should have been chosen as the League of the Year, and that numerous stars should have been put on the cover. She said the WNBA has a long legacy of black stars and that, and I quote, "Something clicked with the WNBA last year because of the draft. It's not just Caitlin Clark, it's Reese," as in, of course, Chicago's.
She continued after that. Johnson went on to say that the WNBA has taken to get to the point. It took about 28 years. Where we are at the moment, and something this year clicked with the WNBA, and the reason behind this is of the players who entered the draft. Simply put, it's Angel and not Caitlin Clark. There's so much talent out there, Reese, that hasn't been acknowledged, and I'm not believe we can just blame a single player. Johnson then went one step farther with her critique, adding an additional racial component to "I felt terrible about the interaction. Since I've observed a lot of gamers of hues that are just as gifted, and they were never given the credit they deserved." Her message should have been obvious. Acknowledging Clark on an individual basis was unfair, especially to other players of color, and establish a separation in the league when you simply continue to focusing on only one player, which makes it difficult. Johnson put sentiments to the surface. These remarks may appear to be a logical request for collective acknowledgement rather than individual honors. Ultimately, team sports are about more than a single player, and the WNBA have a lot of gifted players who merit consideration, but context is crucial. And Johnson's AC after that have shown a striking contradiction in her position. Let's see what transpired. Time magazine just revealed that A.A. Wilson was named a Woman of the Year by them, honoring her remarkable contributions to basketball for women. This esteemed individual honor Wilson was positioned in the same way. Only a few months prior, Clark had been in a one player is being recognized for her accomplishments. If Johnson genuinely thought division is created by individual accolades and that acknowledgement ought to be dispersed across, this would have been the whole league. The ideal time to reiterate those fundamentally, the situation was the same as one WNBA is singled out by a big publication player for personal acknowledgement, but Johnson didn't say a word to CNN. This time, there was no fervent plea throughout the interview regarding how Time ought to have realized all of the WNBA's women rather than Wilson was the only one who talked. And her total quiet, countless words about what was truly inspiring her earlier contention regarding Clark's acknowledgement that the difference couldn't be extra stark after Clark got an individual recognition. Johnson was quick to it is publicly minimized and suggested that ought to have been a group honor when Wilson was given a comparable person. Honor. Johnson didn't mind at all. Whatever the case, this obvious contradiction wasn't overlooked in the league. Lexi Brown, a WNBA player, publicly called taking the double standout posting, "May we kindly cease taking action?" Her annoyance was a reflection of what many athletes and supporters wondered if the issue was genuinely one of justice. And why was team cohesiveness the only concern? Applied when Clark was the center of attention. However, the hypocrisy doesn't stop there. Becomes especially clearer when you examine the real business choices made by Johnson using reference to Caitlin Clark in a manner that blatantly contradicts her public remarks. Johnson recently made public that the Mystics of Washington would be moving their home games in opposition to the Clark's Indiana Fever team at CFG Bank Baltimore's arena. Was your typical the venue change signified more than increasing their capacity thrice and leaping from the sports and entertainment arena's small 4,200 seats to a venue that can with almost 14,000 fans. What makes this revealing decision isn't merely the alteration itself, which is the selective. Johnson's application did not reveal a permanent relocation to a bigger location for everyone games for Mystics that she didn't even choose encounters with several elite teams. No, this location change was directed at one particular, the Indiana Fever, which includes the player Johnson had openly implied wasn't entirely to blame for the league's increasing appeal. That there are no financial repercussions that disregard the nearly 10,000 extra tickets for each game are probably going to be offered at higher pricing because to the demand and income for Clark's games potential becomes so overwhelming that a conservative estimate would indicate millions more in ticket sales from these games alone, all of which are driven by the player's own drawing power. Johnson had tried to minimize. Basketball enthusiasts spotted it right away. The inconsistency caused social media to explode, with calls that draw attention to the disparity between what Johnson said, and one fan was frank about her conduct. This owner wasn't the same one who reduced the impact of CC and minimized. She is currently taking advantage of the ticket sales. Another bluntly inquired as to if their Mystics relocate all of their games. Their owner appeared unwilling to provide any recognition for the women's efforts. Caitlin? Basketball movement. Yet she's still competent with additional revenue from Fever games. The inquiries that get right to the core of in the words of one devotee, hypocrisy. Hold on, why not just the Fever games? Each and every game? Or are you choking? Remarks on the league's face. These weren't merely arbitrary online detractors, they were WNBA fans who understood the discrepancy between stark and denouncing personal acknowledgement while simultaneously profiting from individual. To be fair, Johnson doesn't have star power alone in modifying the location for Fever games played by other WNBA teams. Same. The distinction is that those teams were the first to enter the national TV to lessen Clark's personal influence on the league. They does not imply that identifying the player incites animosity by just recognize reality. Caitlin Clark generates previously unheard of interest in women's in basketball. The numbers speak for themselves. When the Fever worked against the last year's average attendance for Mystics, approximately 4,000 supporters. But this year, with games with Clark on the lineup, are selling jersey sales everywhere she goes. Clark has leaped by an incredible. Fever's television ratings were 1,000%. Games have grown in number, and they're not simply remarkable figures, that they're figures of transformation that show how a single player can elevate the biography and financial information of a whole league prospects. What's really important is the way Clark has reacted to all of this. Rather than retaliating against Johnson or being entangled in superfluous drama, she's taken the high road while working for Time magazine. Clark stressed mutual respect throughout the interview. Players' mutual respect and disregarded any indications of jealousy in the league without defensiveness counterattacks. Simply have peaceful faith in her personal journey. The difference between Clark's reaction to Johnson's comments speaks for itself. One aimed to reduce and personal accomplishment and present it, as the other showed possible damage. Under duress, Grace refused to be lured into conflict by this change of location by Johnson is more than simply it is an unintentional business decision. Admission when she asserted the WNBA, not only Clark, deserved recognition. Her remarks had some weight, but true convictions are eventually revealed by deeds. And her choice to particularly profit from Clark's attraction by changing the venue selectively reveals the emptiness of her prior assertions. What does this indicate regarding the WNBA's current leadership situation? Can league executives keep talking in public, minimizing specific stars while developing business strategies in private? The disconnect is all around them. Between private and public texting, making decisions establishes credibility. issue that goes beyond a single owner of one of the most fascinating elements of the circumstance, such as how it exposes a basic misunderstanding regarding celebrity power in sports. All in the history of sports, individual stars have been essential to the expansion of leagues, and Michael Jordan is gaining new admirers. Made the NBA and international Serena Williams a sensation, earned millions. Tennis enthusiast who has never adhered to the NFL ratings were driven by sport prior to Tom Brady. For 20 years, these celebrities didn't reduce their sports, which they made better. Each person's unique brilliance brought in new visitors who subsequently learned about other outstanding players and grow more gratitude for the entire game. The Clark is experiencing the similar dynamic in what basketball analysts think about the WNBA been saying for a long time is finally validated by Johnson's remarks regarding these incidents didn't simply undercut Clark's personal accomplishments. They made an unneeded split in a league that ought to be honoring its up-and-coming stars. Hypocrisy is glaringly apparent when we take a peek at the whole image. Additionally, there is a profoundly ironic aspect to the critique made by Johnson of Clark's acknowledgement. By claiming that Clark was getting very personal attention, Johnson unintentionally provided her with much more, drawing attention by implying that Clark's time cover would lead to animosity among the players. She was developing herself those negative sentiments through her public remarks that go beyond her hypocrisy statements compared to her behavior. There's a greater query regarding Johnson's leadership style as a team leader. The main AR duty ought to be expanding the game and optimizing chances for her players and franchise. But by openly attacking the very thing that's motivating unheard of expansion for the league, she is not acting in her own best interests and her players. This isn't meant to state that Johnson's original argument regarding acknowledging the WNBA's abundance of talent lacks the merit that the league does possess. Numerous exceptional athletes that are deserving celebrities like Jew Wilson, Angel Ree, Alyssa Thomas, and Brianna Stewart, along with numerous others. Sabrina Ionesco is elite athletes competing at the top level, but acknowledging Clark's significant effect on league attendance and watching doesn't make those other players. It generates additional chances for fans to find them, which is the Johnson appears to be missing. Clark in this part isn't drawing attention away from, she's stealing the show from other players. Larger for all of her games always attract the biggest crowds in WNBA history, which indicates that more are keeping an eye on every player on the court. Not just her social media account's presence has prompted millions of new growth in WNBA account follows, perhaps visibility for the entire league. The most significant feature of this other WNBA player's circumstances addressing Clark as opposed to how some executives and owners are responding acting, although there have been sporadic tensions on the court because of the many WNBA veterans in any competitive sport have welcomed Clark and acknowledged the favorable influence she's having on the Sue Bird. An NBA legend and League Woo example has made good remarks regarding Clark's influence on the present game stars such as Anisu have become pals with instead of viewing her as a danger. Clark, the players who share the court. In reality, Clark seemed to comprehend what some executives don't think her achievement is beneficial. Since in women's basketball, everyone, the dynamic that is being played out between Johnson and Clark illustrates a more general difficulty in for many years. Women's sports leagues have battled for recognition, regard, and financial assistance. Now that the WNBA is going through a historically growth, some of its leaders appear to uncomfortable with the triumph itself. They have been striving for there nearly a feeling of bitterness that the now a breakthrough is occurring with this specific player as opposed to years ago with former stars. That emotion, possibly comprehensible from a human perspective, is detrimental to the development of the sport. The WNBA's future doesn't rely on declining individual. As analysts, we embrace excellence. Have mentioned celebrities such as Clark raise the league as a whole instead of taking away from it. It is evident that the gap between Johnson's audience and declarations and her business choices has undermined her admirers' trust in her as well as athletes. By critiquing Clark's individual acknowledgement while profiting from her star at the same time, Johnson has positioned herself in a position of power. An awkward nook where she spoke. These behaviors are directly at odds with the fact that Johnson moved in particular matches up against Clark's squad to a more location, while keeping quiet regarding Wilson's awareness of time reveals the actual problem, that this was never about values. It was never about the team. Acknowledgement as opposed to personal honors. Johnson would have been if it had been steady in her statistics, even which athlete was receiving recognition. Rather, her selective personality criticism exposes another factor at work. Whether it's animosity or personal hate, excessive focus, or uneasiness with the shifting league dynamics, Johnson's contradiction implies that the first critique wasn't founded on the she took a moral stand and explained what's the most regrettable aspect of the circumstance is that it causes needless conflict, adding which women's basketball ought to be the WNBA is united in joy. Having a moment that many people considered would never be of true public interest. Widespread media attention and expanding having financial success now should be a priority. of harmony and joy for everybody. Those who are interested in women's basketball rather than assertions such as Johnson's, followed by behaviors that contradict one another, generate friction, and erode the advantageous momentum that the league is going through, provide conflicting messages to supporters, athletes, and supporters about the WNBA's principles, and where the contradiction is headed between statements made in public and private business choices reveal the true problem when a star propels growth, which is a team victory in women's basketball. Perhaps that is what some executives are afraid of. Most of them acknowledge that they depend on their stars as much as the league is necessary for their stars. The way forward for the WNBA overall embraces the stars that propel fascination with the game, when utilizing that platform to display all of the amazing, recognize the talent in the league. Individual excellence, while commemorating team accomplishments, recognize the pioneers who established the framework, while greetings to the newbies who are assisting in order to finish the construction. Or Caitlin Clark and the others are not. Caitlin Clark is the WNBA, and the WNBA's remaining players collaborating to expand the game to previously unheard of levels. The statistics show that Caitlin Clark is changing Sheila and the WNBA regardless. Johnson's actions demonstrate it. What do you think of what she says in public? In this case, do you believe Johnson's change of location reveals her actual emotions? Leave a comment below and press that for more unedited content. Click the subscribe button. You won't get basketball truth bomb BS anywhere else.